Hi guys, this is Nitin and I welcome you to my startup podcast channel Jazar Audio where we share real stories with real learning. So my guest speaker today is Mr. Dhruv Nath. Dhruv is the professor in MDI and an influential angel investor as well as the director of Lead Angels Network. Dhruv is also the co-author of best-selling book Funding Your Startups and Other Nightmares, which has been hot selling in the market. And Dhruv predominantly will be talking to us on how the early stage startups can become investor ready. That is ready for funding. Hi Dhruv, welcome to Jazar Radio and thank you for talking to us.
Thanks so much.
My pleasure. So let me start with the first question and inarguably in everybody's mind. Why over 90% of the early stage startup, they never get funded?
Okay, that's a very interesting question. I think the founder must realize that the investor has a choice. See, the founder has one baby and like all young parents with a baby, they believe their baby is the best in the world and everybody must believe that, right? But that's not true because that baby is competing for funding with a huge number of other babies and ultimately the investors, they have a restriction of funds. They can't invest in every company. So most founders, they haven't really studied their business enough. Okay, for instance, many of their businesses that they come up with, they are non-scalable, which means they cannot grow to beyond a certain size, in which case the investor is not interested. Or in many cases, they find that they have no real revenue model and they hope that, once they've got enough customers who are free customers, somewhere they will pick up revenue through maybe advertising or whatever else. But the investor is not satisfied with that, right? Or I'll give you one very simple example. You have this urban company which does repair at home. So I have come across a large number of founders who come and said, we are doing this, we are getting repairs done at home and we'll do it far better than urban company. Fundamental question we ask them is, how are you better? Can you explain why? Sir, our quality, our level of satisfaction will be better. We ask them how. They don't have an answer. So the point is, you have to realize, the founder has to realize that the investor has a choice and he need not invest in the company just because the founder believes it is great. The investor has to be convinced it is great and that is not the case in many ways. So I think that's fundamentally the problem.
Okay, so particularly post the COVID-19 pandemic, what factors or facets the investor look for in the startup to fund them?
I think there are 2-3 key things that have happened and founders need to be aware of it. So first of all, there are some sectors which are completely out of favor right now, right? So investors will not even look at them. And these are obvious sectors. Sectors like hospitality, hotels, restaurants, anything to do with movies, outdoor entertainment, not indoor entertainment, gyms, right? So anybody who's in any one of these sectors, investors will not even look at today. Secondly, in today's environment particularly, what has happened is COVID has shown investors the fact that there are risks in any startup and sometimes those risks are not even visible, right? So therefore, what investors are asking today is, show us the revenue, show us traction. If you can show us traction, we are willing to consider you. If you have a great idea with all the best technology, everything else, but you don't have paid customers, sufficient paid customers, haven't been able to show growth, then let us wait for some time. We'll watch your startup and we will only invest later on once you've proven yourself. So traction becomes extremely important. I think the third big thing that has happened, and I'll take a story just share that, is, this COVID pandemic has actually become a mean for investors to separate the men from the boys. So there are lots of these founders who said, given the pandemic, my God, I cannot do anything. I'll just wait this out. Let me see what to do. Mar gaya, and so on. Investors do not like founders like that. Investors like founders who fight. They fight, somehow try and survive, and therefore last out with the pandemic. So one very simple example, there is a company that I have been spending time with. It's an agri-tech company. So basically what they do is they are into organic food. So they pick up organic produce, organic vegetable and fruit from Himachal and they transport it to Delhi and then they sell it in Delhi. And a lot of people today are very interested in organic and natural food. So they have a large market size. Now, once the pandemic happened? Unfortunately, all the supply chain from Himachal did snap.
Yeah.
So these guys, their business was completely killed. Now, one option was they would have said, okay, we will wait till the pandemic lasts out. Instead, what they did was they said, no, we're going to fight. So what they said was, okay, we can't get organic food, but even the local farmers in Delhi and nearby who supply non-organic stuff, even they have not been able to supply to retail outlets. So what we will do is we will pivot our business model for the time being, temporarily, pick up the stuff from here and sell it locally, right? So they actually survived through this period, and the retailers realized that these guys were in it for the long haul. They were reliable guys. So now that the Himachal supply chain is coming back, retailers are very, very keen on these guys. So, that's an example of a founder who said, boss, I will not give up in this pandemic. I will pivot. I will last out. And investors look for such fighters because, you'll always have problems.
Yeah.
Today it's a pandemic. Tomorrow it will be some other crisis. So the investor always wants to look for founders who are willing to fight it out, who are willing to survive. So I think that's the key third thing that investors are looking for in this period.
Great. So to summarize, we can say it's the team first, then comes the market along with its business model, and finally the traction.
Absolutely. In fact, at early stages, it is very difficult to figure out whether the startup is likely to do well or not.
Yeah.
So in the early stages, people look at the founder. Because if we have a good founder, even if it's in trouble, he will pivot the business model to ensure that he succeeds.
Exactly.
So we look at the founder even more than the founder.
Right.
Okay. So Dhruv, can you share the stories of 2 startups which failed and the key reasons behind their failure?
So let me share one or maybe two. First of all, and I won't name these companies, it's not fair. So there is an interesting company which came to us 2 months after Prime Minister Modi's Swachh Bharat Abhiyan. Now, these guys, when they came to us, they were a group of techies, very, very good, solid engineers. And they said, sir, we have come up with a waterless urinal. Now, we were extremely excited as investors because, the Prime Minister has said you need to build 1-2 crore toilet. But where is the water? Where will the toilet get clean? Now, here was a solution where they said we don't need water, right? It will be a waterless urinal. We were extremely excited.
Yeah.
And then we asked him, I said, look, how will you sell this? How will you market this? Oh, sir, we'll appoint distributors. Wonderful, great. So we studied this in greater detail and then we asked them to come back in 1 month to finalize. They came back in 1 month and we asked them, look, have you appointed the distributors? No, sir, but now we are working on something even more exciting. We are working on a female equivalent of the same. Suddenly, the enthusiasm of the investors plummeted.
Okay.
Because here were guys, they had such a great thing going, but they had fallen in love with their own product. And incidentally, this is a very common thing which happens with techies. They are techies, they create a great design, but they have no business sense.
Right.
We said, boss, just go out, run, grab the market before you get other people coming in with something similar. So, one of the fundamental reasons why a lot of these startups fail is that they're created by techies.
Yeah.
Tech guys who don't have a business sense. You must remember, ultimately it's not a tech thing. It's a business. You have to run a business. If you don't have business sense, please get yourself a co-founder, somebody you trust, somebody who you can work with, who has business sense, so jointly you can do it. So I think this is one big reason why startups fail. So there's another example, and I will call the startup Wed Gift, although that's not the real name.
Okay.
So, the interesting thing is that in the Western world, as you're aware, there is this concept of wedding gift registries.
Yes.
When a couple get married, who decides what gift the couple gets? It is not the couple. It is the guest. And very often you get the same gift, 10 copies, 5 copies, absolutely useless.
Yeah.
And finally the couple has to send it out to other couples on their wedding. So it's a meaningless exercise. So in the US and the UK and many foreign countries, what they do is the couple create a list of things that they would like as gifts. And these are put up on websites which are really wedding gift registries. So once you put that up, you send an e-card to your friends when you're inviting them. And the e-card will contain one clickable icon, and that icon will lead you to the wedding gift registry. So the guest can see what gift this couple really wanted. Guests can then select out of these gifts. And therefore, the couple gets what they want, and hopefully only one copy of what they want. It's a great concept. And not very popular in India, just about starting. So this particular founder decided that, this is a great concept to bring to the country, to India. So we were also interested. The problem here was, because it was a small setup, so what would happen is the guest just would go through the registry, decide which gift he or she wanted to buy, and then pay for the gift, buy it online on the same gift registry, and it would be gift wrapped and delivered to the married couple. Right? Now, the problem is this was a fairly small setup, and therefore the prices that these people could manage on the website of these gifts were much higher than the prices of the same gifts on Amazon. Now you see the problem. So what guests used to do very simply is they would go to the site, figure out what the couple wanted, then go to Amazon and buy the same thing at 30% discount. The problem is these guys had actually what we call no entry barrier, which means there was no way to prevent another competitor to compete with them. So they actually had no business model. It was only a discovery platform. There was no revenue model. So entry barrier here was the fundamental problem. So you have a lot of similar cases, but basically I find that most of these founders who have failed have not really thought through this. I think that's the key. You need to think through the business, preferably with an outsider, maybe a mentor who can see it dispassionate, because you will be very, very passionately involved. You may not be able to see it dispassionate. So I think that's very, very important.
Interesting stories. So how can startups be really funding or investment ready?
So I will give you 10 things. We've just written a book called Funding a Startup and Other Nightmares. I have written it jointly along with Sushanto Mitra. Now, in this book, based on the past many, many years we have spent in evaluating startups, we have come up with a framework which seems to be something that successful startup founders follow, and the failures do not follow that framework, right? So I will suggest a framework here. The framework is what I call persistent. PERSISTENT. And this, by the way, is an acronym, right? So I'll just share what this means. So the first P, the P in persistent stands for problem. Are you solving a problem for your target customer? Because if you're not, there is no way he's going to pay you, right? So that's the first. Second is E, which stands for earnings model. Do you have an earnings model? Are you going to get revenues? If you're not getting revenues, again, you're not viable, right? Then you have R in persistent, which is risk. What are the risks that your startup faces? For example, I talked about wet gift. The fundamental risk is people coming to your site, figuring out what the couple wants, and then going to Amazon and buying. It's a huge risk. Most founders do not look at their potential risk. They assume there'll be no risk, which is wrong. Every business has it, right? Then you have S, which is size of the market. So if your market is not large enough, you can't grow. And if you can't grow, you won't get investors to fund you, right? So you need to be in a market which is large enough. Next is I for innovation. Incidentally, if you have an innovative solution which is tougher to copy, and preferably if you have a patent or two, then your startup is more likely to fundable, because investors, that's what they want to see. They want to see innovative solution, not a me too solution.
Right.
So after I, you have scalability. You may have a large enough market, but even in that large market, can you scale up rapid? Because if you don't, the other guy with a little more money will scale up faster than you, and he'll keep. Right. Then you have T. T stands for team, which is essentially the founder and the next level. Yeah. And that's very, very important. If you go back to the example of the waterless urinal,
right.
We don't want pure techies. We don't want people who don't understand risk. We don't want people who are not passionate about their startup, right? So T becomes extremely important. Then you have E, which is entry barrier, which is what we had a problem with in the case of wet gift. Then is M, which is if your market size is large, but it's very crowded, then you identify a niche, a large enough within that market, right? So, for instance, there are lots and lots of sites which are into travel. But there are a few guys who said we'll not go into generic travel. Instead, we will go into only boutique hotels and boutique resort and homestays. Now, that's a niche, but it's a large enough, and therefore they're not really competing with the Make My Trips and the Yatras and the Go Ibibos of the world. Right? So that's niche. And the final thing is what we call traction, which is the culmination of all the others. Because if all these are okay, show me the proof. Show me the fact that you're actually getting revenue, you're getting customers, you're getting repeat customers, and the number of customers is growing. Right? So persistent is the framework. And by the way, we have not created this. We have evolved this from all the successes and failures that we have seen. So which is why we suggest that any founder who has a startup, evaluate his startup within this frame. So I will give you one final 11 point. Persistent is an acronym, but in addition, the English word persistent is what the founder has. Because when you have a startup, you'll have all kinds of problems. You'll have competition coming up, you'll have RBI coming up with new regulations, SEBI or the Ministry of Corporate Affairs will have new issues, the Finance Ministry will come up with an Indian tax, all kinds of issues you'll have. You have to persist, you have to be patient. Because if you're not persistent, then unfortunately entrepreneurship is not for you. Take up a good job, get a decent salary, get it at the end of the month. But if you have to be an entrepreneur, a successful founder, founder, you have to be very, very solid person.
It's awesome framework. So Dhruv, can you share about your book, Funding Your Startup and Other Nightmares? I mean, its journey and the success story.
I have been in this field of startups and funding startups for about 6-7 years now, and my colleague, who is my co-author, he's been in this for about 25 years. What we've realized over time is a few things. First of all, most founders have no clue about funding. No clue. Absolutely no clue. They have no idea what a term sheet is. They have no idea what shareholder agreement is. They have no idea what the investor is looking for. They have no idea what it means to create a pitch to the investor. So funding is a subject which is actually fairly alien to most founders. Many of them understand their product. Many of them understand their business, but they have no clue about funding. Right? So we looked around. Are there books available on the subject of funding startups? So there were very few, especially in the Indian context. Right? So there are books on startups, but not on funding. So that was step one. We said, okay, let us focus on this. Second, even the books that are available, the problem is, who will they talk about? They will talk about Flipkart. They will talk about Byju's. They will talk about Ola Cabs. They will talk about Grofers, about Oyo Rooms. The huge guys who perhaps were startup maybe 10 years back, 20 years back. But today, your startup founder who's struggling cannot identify with them. Right? Yeah. So, I'll give you a parallel. If you want to get into the movie industry, it's a great idea to learn from Shah Rukh Khan. But you must also learn from the guy who came in maybe 1 year back and is still struggling. Yeah. Because he is the guy who you can identify, and he's the guy who can really teach you, right? So what we decided was that we go talk about the chotu startup, those who are maybe at 1 crore or 2 crores in terms of turnover, who started typically 2 years, 3 years back, and who you can identify with, right? Yeah. And nobody talks about these, right? Because these are not those huge unicorns who everybody worships. Therefore, nobody talks about them, right? So secondly, we decided on this. Thirdly, equally important, we said, look, not only can you learn from success stories, but it's probably even more important to learn from failure. So again, I'll go back to the Shah Rukh Khan example, right? It's good to learn from the guy who, made it as an actor, but it's even more important to learn from the guy who came from the villages of Punjab, tried his hand at acting, failed, went back to his village, because you can learn from him what not to do, So what we decided was we will have enough stories about successes, and we will also have enough stories about failure, and all these stories we will analyze through the framework of persistence. So at the end of the book, the founder tries and gets to know that, look, persistence is the right model to follow, because the failures typically have not followed one or two of those were in it, and these successful guys have actually followed. Yeah. In addition, what we said was, not only do we have all this, we also have interviews with the guys. So you get the other point of view also. So, we've got Sanjeev Dikchandani, who is the founder of Naukri.com. So he has actually written the 4 books. He's given his piece of advice. We have Deep Kalra, who's the founder of Make My Trip. He has given his pieces of advice. We have Dinesh Agarwal, who's the founder of India Mart. We have Yashish Dayya, who's the founder of Policy Bazaar. So we also have these huge big guys who've given their opinion. So all in all, it's a book which authors believe it's unique, and we have found that founders have benefited solidly. It's available on Amazon, obviously a lot of other shops. By the way, this is not only meant for founders, it's meant for potential founders. So a lot of students who want to become founders.
With this, we have reached at the end of this podcast. Thank you so much, Dhruvji, for sharing great insights with the ecosystem, and it was a pleasure to have you on Jazar Audio. And our best wishes for your book, Funding Your Startup. May it continue to be a roaring success story.
Thank you, and all the best.
Are you a founder of an early stage startup and looking to raise funding? Get your startup investor ready before even you start pitching to your prospective investors. For know-how, please visit www.jazaro.in. That is www.jasaro.in.
Lastly, I want to thank all the listeners who took their valuable time to listen to this podcast. Keep rocking, be safe, and don't forget to share.